allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. First United Methodist Church.
Gracious God, we give thanks for the gift of a new year. And as we gather here in this room, and as we know decisions are about to be made, Lord, we ask for your wisdom and your insight to fall upon us all. God, may we remember that it takes all of us to do the work of being a community, of being your people. So I thank you for these men and women that are here to make these decisions, guide them and bless them. And may we all sense your peace and your light in this year to come. And I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you. Roll call.
Savers. Rice. Dosher. McCardle. Barrington. Allen. Charts. Smith.
Okay, we have a quorum. Consent agenda items. Items appearing on the consent agenda may be removed by a city council member for discussion at the beginning of the formal agenda items. Is there anything you wish to remove? Not, we'll entertain a motion. Motion by Mr. McCardle. Second by Mr. Barrington. Further discussion?
Yeah, there was a handout about the changes to the sidewalk stuff. Is there an update on that, or is that different than what's in the consent agenda?
It was requested that we provide a little bit more detail to council from our meeting last week. So that's just the additional information for each of you.
Mr. Johnson, did you want to speak to it?
No, I'm just gonna talk about Stephanie, so.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Further discussion? Anybody in the audience wish to address any of these items? Okay. Well, pardon me?
Pardon, would you ask?
The consent agenda items, if you wish to address them. No? Okay. Roll call, please.
Dosher. McCardle.
Aye.
Barrington. Allen. Charts. Smith.
Aye.
Savers. Rice.
Aye.
Motion carries. Citizens input. If you need to address the mayor, members of council on an item that is not on the agenda, excluding personnel items, please come forward to the podium, state your name and your concern. Presentations are limited to 3 minutes. Items will be considered, but no action will be taken at this time.
Mr. Mayor, members of City Council, City of Mitchell, my name is Philip Spanos. I live at 608 West 5th here in town, and this is in regards with recycling. We've had a really bad deal with dependable recycling. You know, there's been a lot of complaints, and apparently they left town without recycling my stuff for 2 weeks because we were in Omaha for Christmas when they were going to pick up recycling. We didn't want to be a theft risk. Anyway, with the treatment that this whole city had with dependable recycling, even though I'm a biblical Christian, I'm going to say something not nice, but go on your Facebook account, go on your Twitter account, advertise to other communities that might want dependable recycling, or those that have dependable recycling and they got complaints, and just say that they are a bunch of bastards. You know, say it. You know, say that they are bastards for what they have treated the city. And I strongly urge you to be blunt. I'm originally from New England. We New Englanders tend to be very blunt. You know, if we could if a stranger comes up to you in New England and say that you're a son of a bitch, they'll tell you and walk off. So please, say it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to address council?
As long as we're on the subject, I just wanted to congratulate, I don't know if that's the word that we should use, but today I drove down the streets in my neighborhood and I could not believe the number of blue recycling bins that are out. I've never seen that many recycling bins out under former providers. So I hope that this continues. I would say in our neighborhood, probably 80% of the residents had their recycling containers out, so.
It's been a long time since we've seen that. And I will point out that we were awarded, we did go for our grant Friday with the state DNR, and we were awarded 50% of the cost of the.
I got one question about the recycling bins. I noticed that they were made in Mexico. Why, with President Trump, which I support, and I will vote for his reelection, he has an America First policy, and I just want to know why you contracted out to a Mexican company and not an American company.
We
Thank
contracted
you.
with an American company, and they apparently got the bins from Mexico.
They actually have two manufacturing plants, one in North Carolina and one in Mexico, and they're owned by the same company, but Toter was able to get the containers from Mexico faster. But it is an American company that has two locations for manufacturing. Additionally, I'd like to thank everybody that's participating. I think we've had a great surprise, pleasant surprise, and I'd like to say that if anybody has any questions about recycling or the containers or when they're getting picked up, when recycling is getting picked up, the city is now providing that service, and so we want to provide a good service to the citizens. We want to be accommodating. If there's additional material, recycling material from the holidays that you've collected that doesn't fit in the 90-gallon container, hopefully it's a cardboard material, and you just break it down, stack it next to the container. The automated curb tender won't pick it up, but there's someone going around because we know there's a lot from the holidays. But I would like to thank the citizens of Mitchell for participating. I think it's a great start to the program. Also, I'd like to thank District 3 and Neil Putnam and Kevin Roth for all the work that they did on that application, the DNR application. Again, it was $545,000, 50% of what is estimated for the recycling program.
I want to point out also that the blue bins, the old dependable blue bins, you can put those in your recycling bin. I put mine in my recycling bin, so somebody came and got it for the recycling. So I don't know if somebody's collecting them or what, but they can be recycled through your bin, or they can deliver them out to you too, right, Mr. Roth? Okay, thank you very much. Also, one quick reminder: plastic bags are not accepted as recycling material. That doesn't matter if it's the shop or the old Walmart bag, the Coburn's bag, County Fair bag, or the black garbage bags, or the white garbage bags that go in your trash cans. They do not take those, so please do not put your stuff in a plastic bag in the recycling container.
Mr. Mayor, if I could also, no hoses or cords or any videotapes, VHS tapes or cassette tapes, those tangle up the machines over at Millennium. So we want to keep those things out. But there is information out there online, as well as our staff is going around and putting door hangers onto all the doors of the residents of the city of Mitchell. And so that should have been completed for the routes on Monday and Tuesday. Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday are going to be done the rest of this week. But I appreciate all the help from all the departments that are really participating in providing the door hangers. And so in the door hanger, there's a flyer on what to recycle, a notice on how to take care of the toter container, and then there's a magnet and a sticker that also shows what's acceptable and not acceptable for the recycling.
Kyle, I got, are you working with the apartment owners a little bit? As in, each one of them have their own different situations, I guess, as in, they might have an 8-plex, but they only want 2 containers, and they might have, a 6-plex, and they only want 1 or something like that instead of each individual one. Have you guys been working independently with each owner a little bit on that owns apartments around town?
Yes, sir. Actually, we've sent out letters to the apartment owners that we have online and through the Chamber of Commerce. And if we haven't gotten to you and you want to participate in recycling with the apartment complexes, just call us. We'll work with you if you want a dumpster or you want 2 or 4 containers, depending on the size. We'll absolutely work with the apartment owners.
Perfect, thank you.
A real quick reminder, Tuesday will get picked up tomorrow, but if you have Wednesday, Thursday, Friday garbage pickup, that will be picked up next week, and then from then on, it'll be every 2 weeks. One other thing I want to point out, we did receive a card. There was a funeral at, Mr. Barrington needs to read it. There was a funeral that was put on in town, and the family sent a card thanking the cemetery staff as well as the police department staff for their escort and what they did to take care of the family, to get them through the nasty weather to the gravesite. So very nice having those. Appreciate your work on those, gentlemen. Keep it up. Anybody else wish to address council? Okay, Board of Adjustment. Entertain a motion for the city council to recess and sit as the Board of Adjustment. Motion by Mr. Rice, second by who was Mr. Allen? Okay, further discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Action to set the date for Board of Adjustment hearing 1/21/2020. Darren, Devin, and Dustin Long have applied for a height variance of 28 feet versus 22 feet in the side yard on a corner variance of 2 feet versus 20 feet for construction of addition to an existing building located at 520 South Raleigh, legally described as Lot 789, Block 9, Van Epps, First Edition, City of Mitchell, South Dakota. Property is zoned R3, medium density.
Set the date.
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Charch, second by Mr. Allen. Further discussion? Anybody in the audience wish to address this? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Action to set the date for Board of Adjustment hearing 1/21/2020. Alexis Jennings has applied for conditional use permit to operate a family residential child care business at the property located at 1309 East 5th Avenue, legally described as Lot 4, Block 1, Bridal Acres Edition, City of Mitchell, Davis County, South Dakota. Property zoned R2, single family. Motion by Mr. Rice. Second by Mrs. Chark. A little quicker, Mr. Davis, sorry. Further discussion? Anybody nice wish to address this one? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Hearing an action on Tamara Mac Miller, 207 Christine Street. Tamara Mac Miller applied for conditional use permit to operate a family residential child care center property located at 207 Christine Street, legally described as Lot 2, Block 10, The Woods, First Edition, City of Mitchell, Davis County, South Dakota. Property is zoned R4, high density residential.
Mayor and Council, the Planning Commission did hold a hearing on this request and did recommend approval. The Millers had been operating at another address previously, but they're in the process of purchasing this home. But with that, the Planning Commission did recommend approval with some conditions. One is that the fire department inspect the property and that the inspection be approved. That the property or the permit is non-transferable, and then if the business stops for a period of 6 months or longer, then a new permit would be required. And then the Planning Commission did recommend a fence. I did talk to Tamara, and she had indicated that once spring, that was their intent, is once the weather would cooperate.
Do we have any idea, is that the reason that there was one neighbor that was opposed to it? Was it?
No, actually, the opposition came after the Planning Commission hearing. So, unless there's somebody here.
Move to approve.
Motion by Mrs. Church, second by Mr. Savers. Further discussion?
With
Conditions.
the conditions, okay.
Anybody in the audience wish to address it? All those in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Reconvene as city council, entertain a motion for board adjustment to adjourn and city council reconvene in regular session.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Allen, second by Mr. Rice. Further discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Item 13, discussion on landfill fees set by resolution 2019-85. It's been requested that we come back and have a discussion on the land dumping fees at the landfill, so we'll open that up to discussion.
I can go ahead and start off, I guess, and I'm going to ask Mr. Meadham to jump in and ask some questions too. He contacted me a while back and just asked some questions and concerns about the increase In the fees of, for those that have looked into it more, I think it jumped roughly around 24%. Mr. Meadham had some questions. I know, Kyle, you were gone at the last meeting, so we wanted to have opportunity to have it explained, I guess, a little bit more detail to the council and private owners like Meadham are here too. So for the situation, why I asked to have it on the agenda, please.
Yeah, I guess if there are any questions, it was presented back on November 18th on the rest of the fees for the city of Mitchell. There has not been an increase in the landfill fees, the tipping fees, since 2007. So the increase was, I think, 1.5% over the past 13 years, which gets us to close to the what would be a preferred number for tipping fees. We were at 36 plus fees and taxes for the per ton for the landfill. Right now, I believe Sioux Falls is at 38. Out of service fee or out of county permit fee for Sioux Falls is $65 a ton, and we included that as well and went to Davidson County for approval on that as well. I believe Huron is at 78 per ton. So we felt that $45 to $9 increase was warranted, and that's what we presented to the council.
One of the things we did include in there is $2 dedicated for alley repair, so the alley pickup continues. It won't be the city doing it anymore, but there will still be alley pickup. So we wanted to make sure we had something in there to help cover repairs over the course of time.
And I know some of the concern, I'm not going to speak for Jeff, but I know that what he spoke with me is, was some of the concern of just the high increase at one time. And I think some of us will know for the past that when it came up to, I talked to Jeff Smith, I said, you ever remember us doing any increase in tipping fees? And we're like, no, we've been here for 13 years. And so surely to find out it was in 06 or 07 the last time it was done. So the big increase, I think, has a lot to do with it. So it's sort of, I guess, maybe a little bit of shame on us, the fact that we weren't doing a slow increase over the years and have to do it all at once to catch up. But like I said, I know, Jeff, you had some concern on that too.
Before you go, Jeff, Mr. Mayor and Council, I also wanted to say that we did call over to Sioux Falls to get some prices on their private haulers as well, and they were ranging from anywhere from $18 to $33 a month for garbage collection.
Go ahead, Jim.
Sure. Mr. Mayor, Council, Mr. Croce, I guess I just feel 24% is extreme, because we're going to have to pass it on to every business. Every business in a 5-county area is getting this increase. If we raise the price at the pool, $2, it affects this many people. Raising the landfill, everybody buys something at a business, I'm going to throw out Culver's, for example. Their bill is going to go up $150 a month. Over the course of the year, that's a lot. Some of the smaller businesses going up about $25. Sadly, there's a lot of businesses that are just making it the way it is, and all of a sudden, here we're going to increase this utility 24%. I guess my thoughts, I live here, I've been here my whole life. I know these business owners. I don't want to be that. Say, hey, it's 24%. I don't think Verizon or Northwestern, I think anybody, those guys lay awake at night and we're going to raise our rate. They don't care. I do. I guess I'm here for all the businesses around and the people, just because it's a significant increase. It's nothing we can't swallow it, so.
Right, well, you're going to pass, I understand.
Right.
Pass. I'm curious, in the residential side, how many tons get picked up, or how many people does it take to make a ton of garbage? Do you have
The average house has about 49 pounds.
So it takes
In a 90-gallon can,
Right.
average, a little old lady might have 10 pounds, but,
So on average, 20 houses make, 40 houses make a ton.
a ton, correct. Yeah.
Go ahead, try to do it quick. Yeah.
But, and I said that in the paper, when you first raised it, we're not gonna raise the house prices, just, a homeowner has nowhere to pass it on. A business can at least.
No, I understand.
And, a lot of people are on a fixed income, and we just took on about 280 new alley customers. I'm not gonna quote them $18 and all of a sudden, it goes to 21. I don't think that's fair either. So, but I'm
How
just.
many did you pick up?
281.
Eh,
And I'm sure
You're welcome.
Patrick's picked up a bunch also, so.
You're welcome.
Hey, if you think that's all glory, I mean, hey,
I'm giving you a little grief.
in 1 month, we've had to do routing, we've had to buy 281 new containers. Yeah. It'd be different if they were all in the alley, and I picked up 12 houses in every alley, it'd be easy, but there's 3 in this alley, we skip an alley, we pick up 1. So, the routing of it was the biggest, our office staff is pulling their hair out, so, but we'll get through it. But I mean, I'm just here for the community members and the 5 counties around, because they all use this landfill. You know, I don't know, it's nobody's fault that it didn't get raised, and now all of a sudden we're doing it 24%. You know, I think, 5 to 10, or if we had a schedule and say, hey, in 2022, we're gonna raise it another 5, at least we would know.
We might raise it another 5 in 2020.
Then you'll be dealing with another company, because I will sell mine.
Oh,
I think we're pretty easy to get along with. So, like Petrick Sanitation has the contract to do Mount Vernon. They're 1 year into a 3-year contract, and now you guys raise the rates 24%. I would imagine they're probably gonna lose money with the rest of the contract. I have contracts with different places, Walgreens, things like that. We got, 45 days notice to this, to figure out a pricing structure, notify our customers. I guess just a little more notice would be good.
One thing I'll point out, this is a discussion item only tonight, so if you decide you want to take an action, we'd have to bring it back to the next.
Right. Sure.
Just so
And I appreciate that, but I mean, a lot of people get their bills emailed to them. Right away, we had 2 or 3 people call, geez, 24%. And had 4 or 5 call today, small business owners, restaurants, just wondering what they're gonna do. The other thing is, this is the first time businesses are getting hit with a charge for cardboard recycling or any recycling. They've never had to pay recycling fees.
Right.
Dependable did it as part of their contract
Yeah,
with the city.
the regular houses in town basically subsidize what
Right.
was being done for
And
commercial
at the
people.
time, they could pick up cardboard and sell it. They processed it and sold it. Now cardboard is worth virtually nothing. We're picking it up, we take it to your facility for a fee, so we have to charge. We're not getting subsidized by the city. So now Arby's, Culver's, McDonald's, they're all getting hit with a cardboard recycling fee, plus the increase of the landfill fees. It's a lot. I mean, I'm not saying our economy is in the tank, but it's not great. And all of a sudden, here we get hit with this, so.
Jeff, can you give me some idea of what kind of a fiscal impact this has? I mean, overall,
For our business,
uh-huh.
it's gonna be about $135,000 more. So, we generally pay about $500,000 to use the landfill. The landfill takes in an average of 30,000 ton, we bring in 15,000, so we bring in half. So, the city trucks don't pay, so, I mean, our income is more than half of what goes in the landfill, so. But yeah, it's gonna be about $135,000 at 24%. Any questions for me?
Kyle, I was going to ask, obviously there's rationale behind, you just didn't reach that number out, and obviously we do have costs into developing cells and kind of where we're at with that process. And can you kind of step through or take just a couple minutes to tell us the rationale behind taking it up from 36 to 45?
Right, well, we did do the 1.5% from 2007 to the present, so we did go up that percentage per year. That was the basic rationale to get it up to that requirement or that number. Again, going around to the other municipalities close by as far as landfill fees, we feel that we're right in the ballpark. Sioux Falls is looking to increase theirs from $38 a ton. Obviously, they have the out of county jurisdiction as well at 65, which is what we brought in, and Huron is at $78 a ton. So $45 is, to me, it's not out of the ordinary. It's really closer to Sioux Falls number than anything else. I just say that as businesses develop over time, I think they do the increases as well. So they seem to get a benefit over 13 years of not having those increased charges, and I would argue that some are saying that it's better to just do a one-time jump every 10 years than have to creep up. So I guess there's an argument to both sides.
One thing, the piece of equipment that's being replaced, $500,000 piece of equipment. Now, we did get $118,000 of that covered by grant money from DENR, but you still got to cover the other $380,000 for it.
Yeah, so I think it was $540,000. I think we've got 118 from DNR.
Additionally, you've seen salaries or, labor costs go up in the since 2005, and we haven't raised anything based on those. And of course, this year we saw an increase as well. So it's just a time thing in cost, economics, if you will, which makes sense.
And then, Mr. Mayor, then council, the next cell is due to be built next year, and that's a cost at $3.5 million. I think we're trying to get there as best we can. We have to do the engineering design for that, and then the construction. Obviously, the landfills are not cheap. It's expensive to maintain and operate a landfill with all the testing and the requirements. Again, I think the 45 came at a good price. I think it's reasonable. I think a lot have benefited by not having an increase for 13 years. So again, it was time for an increase.
One clarification, Huron doesn't have a landfill, they have a transfer station.
Right.
And that's why it's $75 a ton. I mean, they put it in a building and they truck it somewhere.
Yep.
Not like this one, we dump it right here. And the fact of comparing it to Brookings, Sioux Falls, we're not any of those. I don't know what they paid for the land in Brookings for their landfill. I don't know what their operating expenses are. We're Mitchell. We can figure out a price and make it work. Staten Island, New York is $125 a ton to get rid of it. Okay.
And Kyle and Jeff, I ran the numbers, looked at the consumer price index increase average for the 13 years in question, and it's 1.85. And if you use the future value of money from 2007 to 2019, using that value, you come up to $45.69. So to me, the $45 isn't out of line from a dollar standpoint based on not having the upgrade or the increase for 13 years. But my question then comes to the city of, is there a way, and I'm thinking the answer is no, and maybe Justin, the question is you. If I wanted to say, yep, in 2021, I want to take a vote at the next meeting and say, we're going to have an increase, and in 2022 and 2023, that automatically build those increases in that we vote on now, I don't think we can do that.
No, and
I was asked that question today. Well, why don't you just automatically? I can't encumber a future council.
Correct.
and I've
on-
seen those
on the
types
amount,
of
so-
backfire. It's usually better just to do it on a regular
Right.
schedule than
So
it is to try to do it on.
we already have an item that comes up in October and November every year to look at our fee structure. And I think we will continue that. We just went by those many times and didn't do anything on the landfill. But we do know that we have a 3-year labor contract, and we know what those increases are. And can we at least back calculate and find out what our labor cost increase associated to our pickup fee is, and at least look at every year, at least having that number to discuss as this would be a potential increase.
It'd be definitely better than 24 in one shot.
Correct, and
It's
that's,
hard to
and
swallow.
I got
It is.
2 calls today, the same thing, and their complaint wasn't that the $45 was out of line compared to areas around us, it was the 24% at one time.
Right.
But they wanted us to, they told me, well, tell me that you're going to do it 1.5% for the next 5 years, and I told them I can't do that.
Right. But we need to do something going forward.
Correct.
So we're not hitting these people with 24%. And like I said, they're getting hit with the cardboard recycling at the same time. If I didn't care, I'd raise it 24% and keep hauling trash tomorrow. But I care. I don't want to walk into the Twin Dragon and Danny comes, oh, why is it 24% more? I know these owners. I don't want to be that guy. If I can, ease it along here, I will. So
Then
maybe I care too much.
we
So-
have to figure out something to tie it to cost of living, or, so yearly, it goes up yearly.
At least so that we review it and know what that number is every year, yeah.
This is a recommendation.
Okay.
You know, as far as city services, I'll bet the landfill's one of the few that makes a lot of money for the city. I mean,
We got sewer and water too.
besides that, yeah. But the
We look
landfill
at
makes
those
money.
costs, And we look at those costs once or twice every 3 years. We look at them.
Sure.
And we raised them here in the past. I think we took a big jump on sewer, I believe.
Both water and sewer, you've had three
What I'm saying
raises.
is the park department probably doesn't make any money for the city overall.
Oh.
You know, the landfill has extra,
Quality
I
of
would
life,
imagine. It is a quality of life, I agree. I'm just saying the landfill makes a lot of money for,
But just to clarify, any revenue that comes from the landfill has to stay in the landfill and be used for those purposes. So that's the funds that go
But
to
it does
build
make
the
money,
future
though.
We have
cells.
closure
The landfill
costs
makes
that we
money.
need to keep for, closure costs we need to keep for the landfill based on federal requirements.
and we knew when we built this landfill, we're gonna have to build more cells, right?
Oh, yeah.
Now all of a
Yep.
sudden, it's
And-
like a surprise. Oh my God, we better raise the rate 24%. We gotta build a cell.
I don't think that's not the only component as far as raising the fee. It wasn't just, hey, just because we have to build a cell, we're gonna raise it. You know, it's looking at what's going on with it, overall cost, what's happened.
No, I understand. I mean,
2005, so-
increases are a part of life, but I guess, you know, like I said, 24 is extreme. You know, we haven't raised our rate since the new landfill, you know, so we definitely need to, but, you know, now we're gonna raise it 24 just to cover the tipping fee. It doesn't acquire, you know, everybody got a raise in the last 12, 13 years. Insurance has gone up, you know, so 24 is the minimum what it's going up, so.
Well, I guess this is discussion only, so if you want to, however you want to handle it, but if you want to make a change, it has to come to the next meeting. So we'd have to put it on the agenda. I don't know that necessarily has to be decided tonight, although I'm sure you're anxious to know what's going to happen.
Well, right now, I mean, we're eating the increase, you know, we're billing February 1st for this month, so I mean, I guess we're gonna have to figure something out, you know, before then, and notify the customers. I mean, we have sent out a letter telling them this is what it is. I'm hoping to change it, so.
How did
But-
we do it that time when, Nate, with the park and rec, remember we raised the fees at the rec center? Wasn't there a way that they, I can't remember how we did that, how we staggered it a little bit so that it wasn't all, so they didn't all get hit all at once, it was kind of a, we're kind of climbing on it.
Yeah, we had a discount that we offered for a little while to see how the rec center did during its opening, because we just didn't know. And so we were able to keep some of those costs down. We didn't have to go all the way up.
And after that, it worked out good.
It worked out great, yeah. It worked out good for us, but we're on a cost recovery goal of 75%, so.
But I appreciate your time, so I mean, it's something to consider, and I hope you do. It's not just for our company, I mean, it's 5 counties wide, communities, people, so.
And so the residential customers that you serve are not going to have.
We're not gonna raise theirs, no, no,
It's stayed the same since
correct?
forever.
Yep, so. You know, we've taken on a lot more, I mean, the volume of it is letting us stay the same with the houses, so. You know, but the businesses, you know, weigh substantially more, so we have to raise those, so. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Okay, item 14, discussion on two-way traffic versus one-way traffic, 2nd Avenue, 3rd Avenue, 4th Avenue. I want to point out that we're not talking about all the way across the city. We're only talking about those streets that are impacted with Sanborn construction. We changed them to two-way over this past summer in order to get traffic moving where Sanborn closed it off. We do have another phase of Sanborn that's going to take place from 7th to 15th, so that's 8 more blocks that are blocked off. I would like to see it at least remain two-way until the end of that construction is done.
Nothing to do with those. Has nothing to do with those streets. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, hold it. When I'm done, we'll give you a shout, okay? But you'll have to come up to the microphone, state your name, okay? So anyway, with that being said, to move traffic across Mitchell, it makes sense to leave them two-way at least through this last phase. Now, if you want to come up and speak, come on up and talk.
Melinda Marino, 715 West 4th. I don't see how if the traffic is coming from 7th to 15th, which are two-way streets already, the impact of 2nd, 3rd, and 4th remaining two ways will help with that traffic. And right now, during the winter time, with the snow on the sides and the parking, there's not enough room to pass. Like, people have to move over in a driveway in order for someone to meet. It's not safe. Maybe if you want to do it in the summertime while the construction is happening, but right now in the wintertime, those streets are really narrow. That's
Every street right now is somewhat narrow. We're working on getting them plowed out the rest of the way, so.
Well, my thing is, we voted on it, and we didn't want that, and it just seems like
You
it's
also
being
voted
pushed.
on it prior to any construction taking place.
Right.
And what we're doing is there's 8 blocks that are going to be taken, you're going to take out the ability to go east-west across the city. So if they remain two-way, you
Right.
still have the way to move that traffic through there. Nobody's saying it's not necessarily going to go back to one-way at the end of this. What I'm saying is leave them two-way until the construction's completed. Okay?
Yeah,
And
it's a
then
discussion.
my preference personally is leave them two-way, but I understand you guys voted on it and you want it to be one-way. So if we want to take it back, we do it, but after the construction is complete.
Yeah, Bill, I'm just gonna repeat what she said. I don't understand why it wasn't set back as soon as the construction was done. You know, it's like now, I come from my house and I go down the street, and I've got people coming at me, you know. I didn't expect that. I thought when Sanborn was done, the streets would go back the way they were. Because that's what the city voted on. The people of the city voted to keep those streets one way.
They did.
So,
I guess to me
Why?
that Sanborn's not finished until all the phases are done, but that's, I guess, my opinion.
well, my opinion is that shouldn't make any difference.
But it will make a big difference because
Why?
you're taking 8 blocks of east-west travel away. So if you make them one way, now you've taken a lot of ability to move traffic through their way. But council can make that decision. That's entirely up to them.
I don't see it that way.
And
I'm not understanding.
Construction wasn't completed until November, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, I was really surprised when the streets didn't go back right away. You know, when Sanborn was open. I can see why it had to be undone while the construction was on. That was fine because it impacted those people that lived on, you know, by there. And that was fine. But, you know, and I guess I thought when the people of the city voted that they wanted the two-way streets or the one-way streets to remain. And now you guys come along and you want to change it, you know.
We haven't changed anything.
Well, but you
The
just.
intent is, the way we'd like to see it is it stay that way until the last phase of Sanborn's done.
And I just wanted to let you know one thing. So I know that we had that vote, and now people have had the opportunity to kind of try on the two-way streets. And I don't know if you remember Mr. Olson, Mel Olson, who was on the council.
Yes.
He was the most vocal advocate of one-way streets. He lives in that neighborhood, and he did not want them to ever be changed to two-way streets. And he came in a couple of months ago and said, I was wrong, which we can, Mel, if you're listening, this is, you know.
That's fine. Do we want to put it up for
Teasing about that.
vote
But,
again?
but and I've had other people who live in the neighborhood who also were very against having the two-way streets, who have also contacted me and said, you know what, we're fine having these stay two-way streets. So I know that we voted a while, I wasn't on council at the time, but I know that there was a vote and that it passed, that we should keep it one way. But I also think that this has given people a chance to try this on for size. My understanding is that the streets are the same, whether they're one-way or two-way. Can you clarify that, Kyle?
The same.
Yes, Mr. Mayor and Council, if Stephanie can pull up the graphic, it should show the east-west, either one. It should have widths that are identified in color. There is a section of Fourth, West Fourth, that is down to 30 foot, but there's also a section, a block of West Fifth that is at 30 foot width, and there's two-way traffic there. So the other argument that 36 feet or 40 feet is not wide enough, that's just not accurate. The other streets in town are anywhere from 30 to 36 to 40 feet wide. So I
As an
have trouble
example,
understanding that
yeah,
argument.
So Fifth, that's a two-way street. How wide is Fifth?
It ranges going from 36 down to 30, and then that orange section that's highlighted is 30 feet wide. So, and that's a two-way street. So to say that the other streets aren't wide enough, I don't understand that argument.
Well, I'm not saying, yeah, that's,
Not that the other ones aren't, well, that's narrow right there too, it's too narrow.
what happens is in the winter, it's like on my street is fine. I have no problems, because there's very few cars that park on the street. So they get, what do I would say, dug out or bladed out really well from curb to curb. You go from Minnesota, and I'm a half a block off of Minnesota to the west, you go to the next block, and there's rental properties on that block, and there's a lot of cars that park there. So when it gets shoveled by the snowplows, it doesn't get done very well, and it has all these cars. So when you go down there, if the cars are also parked there, you've also got ruts in the middle because they haven't been able to do it well and stuff like that. So it's not always just the width of the street. In the wintertime especially, it's because you hit those ruts and you think you're gonna, get pushed into somebody that's parked along, the side. But anyway, that's my thing. I don't like it, so, my thought.
Steve Arms, 513 West Fourth. I noticed in your agenda on your webpage that you had a bunch of stuff in favor of two-way on there. And I'm wondering, is this something that we need to come up and say against it because we're for one-ways? Because the agenda says that you're in favor of two-ways. On your agenda,
Jim says it's a
that was in the-
discussion on two-way versus one-way. but
discussion, yes.
There's information related to one-way versus two-way. It
Okay,
doesn't
but
say
if you
we
click on
favor
that-
one or the other, but
If you click on that, it shows a bunch of things, the reason for two-way.
He's referring to the staff report that was provided to council in the packet from the Public Works
you're talking
Department.
about this stuff.
Yep.
Mr. Mayor and Council, so that at the end of the agenda staff report, it is recommended that any changes decided for implementation be delayed until spring of 2020, when the city traffic crew can paint the new markings on the road. That's really the recommendation at the end. Whether the council decides to keep them one-way or two-way, we would recommend that any change happens, because we can't paint the roadway one-way at this point, and we would like to, if it was going to be reverted back to one-way streets, we'd like to do that.
That makes sense.
Why can the city council change it when it was by the vote of the public? Over 60% that we have one-way streets in that area. Why does the city council have the ability?
I wouldn't say it was 60%. I would say 30%.
It was
of people
63%.
voted. But 63 of 30%, yeah, I get that.
Doesn't
I get
matter
that.
how many people voted.
Right.
So, Mr. Mayor and Council, again, I think the reason it was changed was because of the Sanborn construction.
Correct.
And
Correct.
understand that, it wasn't a,
That is correct. But we want to make sure that it changes back to one-way. Now, we live on a one-way street, and right now with the snow and stuff, it's bad. It really is. You don't get traffic going past each other, because in our block, we have at least 5 cars parked on one side and 5 parked on the other side at most of the time. And there is no room to drive. We're also in an area that is residential. Small kids come out between cars. If you're driving down that road and you're coming with two-way traffic, you're gonna be watching the two-way traffic instead of looking for what the activity is. And I just disagree that in that narrow of stuff, that we should allow two-way traffic. Now, I've got a bunch of stuff that says that, but do I have to wait until we come up after?
Well, there won't be, it's only discussion tonight. So if you're looking at changing it, we'll bring it back to the next meeting. But we do have the issue, we won't be able to paint the arrows to change them. Sanborn took a little longer, obviously, than anticipated this year. And the paint won't stick to cold surfaces, so.
So I guess what I'm asking is it will not go back to one way?
Not until, well, I would not expect it to go back till at least the spring of 2020, this year, when we can paint the arrows that show it two-way. Otherwise,
Okay,
we're.
I understand that, but do we have a good chance after that to make sure it doesn't stay two-way?
Well, I think right now the council, your position is it was voted on, and it should go back to one-way at the end of this, correct? The question becomes, do we leave it for the next phase of Sanborn? My opinion is we should. I guess it doesn't.
I
not
personally
have to
feel like it's confusing for us to keep switching back and forth. In my opinion, I think we should just leave it as it is through the next phase of Sanborn, and then we can.
Mayor, would we have to have a vote on it?
We
on
can't.
the agenda for 2 weeks from now?
Yes, we will have to do that.
If we want to leave it until after the third phase of Sanborn Street is done.
I think what you could do, I'm just going to make a suggestion here, is you can have the Public Works Department bring it back at the point when they're able to get the arrows repainted. Or if you want to make the decision earlier, I guess that's up to the council.
I would rather make the decision, and then if, depending on which way it goes, then Public Works would know to be able to plan for that timing.
Okay, we can bring it back to the next meeting then.
There you go.
For a decision. Okay, fair enough?
So we're not
So-
going to finish anything tonight?
Tonight's a discussion only, and that's what it says in the agenda.
So 2 weeks from now, we need to come back, and that's
Correct.
when
That'd be the
everyone's making
20th, I believe, right?
It'll be a Tuesday night.
21st because of the holiday.
21st.
There's a holiday on Monday, so it'll be Tuesday night.
Is there any reason that we need to? Because does the city council really have the ability to make it two-way instead of one-way, where it was voted on to be two-way?
Well, they
Yes,
could, but I
be
think,
one-way.
well, I guess that's up to the council. Their decision, I think, thus far has been, it was voted on, so your intent is to leave it. But I would say if you come to the discussion, so they can hear what you have to say.
Okay.
I'll chime in there. It was my opinion when we voted on it that they would only be two-way streets for the first part of the construction and not the second part. And I made a comment during the meeting to that effect. And to me, it was a surprise when, on November 28th, when Public Works said that the roads are open as two-way from Minnesota to Sanborn. To me, that caught me by surprise. If the city was going to make a decision and publicize it, it would be that those streets have returned to one-way. We didn't have, in my opinion, the council never gave them the authority to make them continue as two-way. And I'm just giving you my opinion.
Okay. So at that next meeting, we're saying that it will probably, more than likely, go back to one-way because it was just a temporary?
More than likely, there will be a vote of whether they remain two-way until the end of the next Sanborn construction phase, or will they revert to one-way as soon as Public Works can do the appropriate signage in the springtime.
Okay. All right.
Basically, they have to be able to paint the arrows so that they don't show up as two-way.
Yeah, right now, they need to be painted because some of them are pretty bad.
Yeah, you can't do it in the winter.
All right, thanks.
Phil Spanos again. To me, I think you shouldn't have made third, fourth, and second, third, and fourth two-way to begin with. I have Asperger's, and I might be speaking about other motorists who have Asperger's that were so used to driving one way on, that's been one way since I've been here, since I've lived in this community since 1987. And it's very confusing. Plus also, I used to be a Massachusetts driver, and sometimes my Massachusetts driving instincts get come back, so thus I'm a masshole. And if you want to know what a masshole is, Google it. So I'd rather have, all a second, third, and fourth one way, and I'd love to have my street one way going west from the hospital all the way to the end of West Fifth. That's what I'd like to see. Because sometimes the traffic on West Fifth is, maneuverable, hard to maneuver. So.
One of the things that has occurred to me is that we've been provided with a lot of information, thanks to Kyle and crew, regarding some of the benefits of two-way versus one-way streets. I wish that the public had access. I know they do, but I wish that there were some way that this information could be disseminated to everybody so that they're looking at it. I think it's an issue that we need to look at from all sides. Unfortunately, I won't be here next week at our next meeting, but nevertheless, I do think that some of this information that we've been given, it would be great if the public saw that so that you're not just looking at it in terms of your own world, but maybe we're looking at it in terms of our community and what would be best for the community as a whole.
Susan, excuse me. I've got a comment, and if you have a comment, I'd appreciate it if you'd come up there. Susan, I also would like to make the point that I find it a little disconcerting that the city only is sending out information about two-way street benefits and not information about one-way street benefit. When we had this discussion 8 years ago, we had opposing sides that both presented, and you can find as much information as you want about benefits of one-way streets and two-way streets. And I find it a little disconcerting that the city only presented two-way street information in the agenda item that was brought up.
And her concern about people couldn't see it, they can go to the website and look at it just like I did. And that does give you information there.
Yep.
Okay. There also was something said about that we should have an expert to look at it and decide whether we should do it or not. Is that correct?
Part of the proposal and the information in Public Works contains maybe we should have a traffic study for the entire city. We know we have challenges in the city on east-west through streets and north-south through streets because of the railroad and because we just don't have corridors that can move lots of traffic without coming to a stop sign and turning right or left. And maybe that's a long-term position to take. Part of the 2040 discussion that we had for long-term planning talked about corridors, especially from south to north, of how to get from, say, downtown to the interstate or from the lake to downtown. You have very limited avenues in order to do that. And an overall traffic study and flow might give indication of areas where we could improve.
Okay. I was just curious about that, because if we were going to have a study just about this second, third, and fourth.
Not just about this, it would be about how to move traffic more efficiently. Basically, if there's a train coming by, you either have to go to Foster or to Burr or to Sanborn, and that's your only options.
In Minnesota, yeah.
Minnesota, you'll have to stop at the train.
Yeah.
Oh, that's correct.
Bypass.
And same thing on the bypass.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Yep. Thank you.
Maybe what you guys should have done was send letters to to homeowners of the affected areas, so that we would have known. You know, when construction came up, you know, I was surprised, it was a complete surprise to me. You know, that if you would have, you know, wrote letters, you know, to individual homeowners, you know, via snail mail, I think you wouldn't have had this problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, anybody else wish to address this? Okay, Friends of the Fire Steel, Lake Mitchell fundraising efforts, Mr. Kippis. Again, this is information only, no decision will be made tonight.
Hi, Danny. Okay, good evening. My name's Joe Kippis. I'm with Friends of the Fire Steel. If you recall our last Lake Mitchell Advisory Committee, if you recall the members of that committee, then you know who the Friends of the Fire Steel are. But just very quickly, our membership is Justin Luther, Kevin Erdman, John McLeod, Mike Kuchera, Todd Boyd, Brian Temple is treasurer, Mark Pitts is secretary, Mike Valley is a vice president, and I'm president. Also, as non-voting members of our committee, is Kyle Croce and Nate Powell. So we formed in June of 2019. We applied for nonprofit status with the Secretary of State, and we received our certificate of incorporation as a nonprofit. We've applied for 501c3 status, and we are waiting for IRS determination at this time. I believe it was a 6-month potential waiting period, and it seems they're going to use all 6 months, so that would be March. Our purpose is to reclaim and maintain a treasured Mitchell area water asset, the Fire Steel and its lake. That's our stated purpose for Fire Steel, Friends of the Fire Steel. One of the reasons we chose to reorganize is being independent, not directly associated with the city. We were better suited for fundraising, and so that's our primary effort right now. The city's done a good job with the work they've done in the watershed, acquiring some key property just west of the lake, and then potentially finding funding for other work to be done in the watershed. That work is moving along fast. Our project was the in-lake, and there's some funding challenges with that in that we haven't found any grant activity that directly goes to the dredging that we think we need to do. So with that, we need to start a capital campaign. And our fundraising target will be $3 million that we would plan to contribute to the city for the correction or the improvement of the water quality in the lake. So that's an aggressive target, and we looked at each other and pretty much decided we don't have that skill set. You know, we're either too busy or it really requires someone who has that capability, and we felt someone who's already demonstrated and proven that they're good at this. So with that, we chose Maximizing Excellence out of Sioux Falls. We made contact with Cindy Elifritz Peterson. She is the founder and will also be the primary on our capital campaign. Cindy's background, first of all, Maximizing Excellence will use a two-phase program. The first phase will be they come into Mitchell and our area to determine first, you know, where are we at, get involved with some education as to why what we're doing is important, and then try to get a good feel for what is the capability. Now, as Friends of the Fire Steel, we said $3 million. What we may learn through this phase one is that we could do more, or maybe that's too aggressive. That's the whole purpose of phase one. That's why it's important. Then phase two would be the actual fundraising activity. So now I'd like to introduce Cindy. Cindy Ellifritz Peterson has 20 years of experience in fundraising. She has directed the Sioux Empire United Way, Midlands and Omaha United Way, Central Minnesota United Way, several successful capital campaigns, including Stockyards Egg Experience, Vermilion Now, Levitt at the Falls, and as I mentioned, the Sioux Empire United Way. So what we are mainly interested in, what we're trying to explain with the handout, is phase one of this capital campaign has a fee of about $28,500, and there'll be expenses that are added on to that, so probably potentially around $32,000. But the Friends of the Fire Still will take care of the first half of that, and then we would ask the city to help us with the second half. But before we get further into that discussion, I asked Cindy to come up and join us. So I'd like to introduce Cindy, and if you have questions for her about her business, now's a good time.
Thank you. Good evening. This is a quick drive for me because I actually live in Salem. And so I spend a lot of time in Mitchell, and I'm very much so looking forward to being a part of this project and helping take this important aspect of Mitchell forward. It's something that I can see my family using on a very regular basis. So this project is not only something that brings my talents, expertise, and experience to the Mitchell community, but it's also personal. I'm not sure, everybody's got the two-pager there. And so I think it's important that if you're going to make an investment, you get a chance to spend some time getting to know what that investment looks like. And a lot of that has to do with people power. And so that's why I'm here, is so that you can get to know me, ask questions about the project or thoughts related to that. And certainly leadership of the group is here to certainly show their support and why they think this makes sense as well. So I'm happy to be a resource as you need, as you look forward to making your decision. Anything else specifically you'd like me to speak to, Joe?
Well, we had, in previous conversations, there was interest in having you join us. So the people that wanted Cindy to attend, what were your questions?
My question is, how do you come up with the total $32,000? I see it here, so kind of explain what you do in some of your sentences here.
The fee is a flat fee, and so what you're investing in is your outcome. And the outcome is to determine, as you can see on the second side, the outcomes that you're investing in is what is the true financial fundraising feasibility of this vision. Is this something that makes sense to more than just the Friends of the Fire Steel? What do others see as the true and long-term benefits for the project? What motivates people to be a part of and truly invest in a project like this? What is the feasibility of the community, both individuals and corporately, to bring us to that point? And then what would be the strategies? What we learned through this process also is what are the strategies that we need to bring forward to bring a fundraising capital campaign of $3 million, which is by no means a small amount of dollars. We want to do it right. We don't go in and start raising money blindly. And so this is truly the tool that equips us to be successful from the get-go. So the dollar amount is you're investing in the outcome. Good question. Good question.
So do you envision your company being part of phase two then also, or just the phase one?
That would be the ideal scenario. This is something, again, not only do I feel that maximizing excellence with our track record is the right partner professionally for what you're looking to accomplish, but it's also something that I have a personal connection and investment to the ideal outcome as well. Efficiencies and effectiveness that come into play by working with the same firm from start to finish. But what we've done is we've also built it so that the Friends of the Fire Steer have complete control and flexibility over what that long-term relationship looks like. But I think it's both parties' desired outcome is that we'd work together from start to finish.
If it does go to the fundraising part, explain to me a little bit down the road how you take that over and how that gets done.
Wow, that's a really broad question, Dan. Do you mean in terms of executing the project? Do you mean in
Well,
terms of?
the first part, I understand the feasibility. I'm going to guess how much money you think you can raise in Mitchell's. I'm assuming that's what I mean.
That's one of the outcomes of the project. Absolutely.
And then let's go on past that. So then that gets through and.
So
I
we
don't-
determined that the
Yes.
community has an appetite to raise $3.2 million, or has the appetite to raise more like $2.5 million. We all know which number we'd prefer.
And what's your plan of attack on that?
Right, so what happens with that is once we have that dollar amount, one of the other key elements of going through this process is that we learn what the messaging and what the conversation needs to be with potential donors, with the community, and with those who have a stake in the desired outcome. And so with that information, we build the fundraising strategy. We build the messaging. We build the timeline. We architect who should the leadership of the campaign be, who should we be visiting with, and specifically what dollar amount should each individual corporation, grant, foundation, all of those different audiences, what should the exact amount be that we go in and ask for, and what should that conversation look like based on what we believe would motivate that person to make an investment like that.
And
so
do you guys do that, or do Mitchell people do that?
that would be something we would do collaboratively. What'll come of that, Dan, which is such a great question, in some cases, it might make sense for them to sit with Cindy Peterson and talk about,
Or golf game?
Dan knows my husband. We could go over golf, we can go raise lots of money, that sounds great. But what we might find is that they want an outside perspective in that ask. What we might find is when we visit with XYC Business, the last person they want to see is in that room is somebody who doesn't own a home in Mitchell, asking them for dollars. And so we make sure that we are very, very intentional, and that every strategy and every conversation that we have is built based on what makes sense for that conversation like this. So we don't just say, well, we're all going to go do this. So in some cases, Dan, it would make sense for me to be the person to do the ask. In some cases, it might not be. And so for me to tell you exactly how that's going to go would really eliminate why we were even doing phase one. That's why phase one is so critical to this process. It saves so much time and so much money long-term because we do things the right way. Thanks for the question.
What's the timeline? How long does phase one typically, you foresee that
It's a
taking?
great question. I like to get rocking and rolling. And so our timeline that we've, with the partnership here would be to start April 1st, and that should take approximately 7 months. I like it when it goes faster, and it ideally could.
And during that time, you're just doing the planning part, you're not actually raising the money, is that?
There will be no dollars asked for during that process. I might do some exploration with some grants, a couple of foundations. I was even, if somebody saw me with my pen jotting a couple of things down for some foundations that I know have funded things like this. I'm like, oh, maybe we look into that a little bit early, because strategically that might be a nice boost to the project, so that when we do start making asks, we can say a certain dollar amount has already been secured from sources that don't even live here, and they're already on board. So, but
That was actually my second question was, do you have access, or do you write grants and things like
absolutely,
that? So-
absolutely. We're a full service firm. There's 5 on my team. Mhm.
Cindy, question for you. How many professional fundraiser ladies or men go out with you, or you go out and just saturate the town, or how do you do this? How many's working in the field at one time?
It's a great question. What I find is that what everyone thinks fundraising is and does is so not what fundraising is and does. So we don't go out and just hit the town and hit the pavement. We're very intentional, we're very strategic, it's very relationship based. Rika Peterson, we're not related, but she's been on my team for 7 years. She will be involved actively with doing this phase one, and where I would be the lead point on both phase one and phase two, but she'll be doing a lot of the work. So it's not just one person doing the piece. But what I would think as we build the timeline and the strategy, I can speak to what I've done in the past. And what we usually do is we spend time putting together a robust group of community individuals. A great deal of community leadership usually sits around that table, and everyone is involved in some aspect of raising those dollars. And we time it out so that there's a kickoff and a celebration and a key community engagement that happens at a very specific time in a very specific way, and then we get to work. And I certainly would be active in that process.
What's the most recent fundraising that you've done?
Well, I don't know if anybody gets the Vermilion Verb, the Vermilion Chamber Area of Commerce, but in everybody's inbox today, who's a chamber member for that, they just got their packet of the celebration for the Vermilion Now Economic Development Campaign. I ran that campaign, and the goal was 1.72, and it's currently at 2,068,000. So that would be one that I'm doing right now. A few were listed off, and I can certainly provide a list if that's of interest. But the experience is there, I assure you.
Just checking.
I'm glad. I'd want to know where my
I've done a little
investment's going as well.
fundraising too. Not much, but I've done some too.
Well, but based on the questions you're asking, I could tell you should probably be on the committee.
I don't think so. I'm so busy.
Somebody write that down.
What do you mean? I'm curious. I'm curious on if you could give any background on the Levitt at the Falls project and what type of outside money was being able to be
Sure.
gathered
Gosh.
there. And to me, the Levitt at the Falls site, I was familiar and dealt with it when it was a hazardous waste site.
Mm-hmm.
When it was the previous junkyard and the city had to.
That's a very.
Joe knows my background, and I dealt with chemicals and waste, and I was part of a group that had to go take a look at that when it got declared hazardous waste. So that changed from that to
Sure,
what it is today. I would love to see the transformation of what Lake Mitchell is today to something as good as that is.
That is a very, very special project to me, and I became so involved professionally that I now actually serve on the board of directors for that. So being a part of that journey has been incredible. One of the most important elements of the success of that campaign, and it would be actually my fourth campaign, that we work collaboratively with the city's Parks and Rec Department. And so the private, public, and municipal partnership is, I think, a really powerful triangle that is why that project was successful. And so part of my role is, and with that and would be with this project, is to not only just put all these pieces together, but how are we making sure that what's best for the city and the city's objectives, what's best for the community's objectives, what's best for those that are excited about the environmental aspects, those that are excited about the tourism opportunities, the economic development opportunities, those that are trying to recruit people to work in their companies, and that becomes a selling point. All of those were things that, through the Levitt project, I helped strategize. Because let's be honest, quality of life and hungry babies, where are you going to put your $100? Well, in some ways, investing in the quality of life project make sure that the babies aren't hungry anymore. And so that was some of the work that we did to make that project successful, is that we found a way that Levitt made sense for everyone. Every person could see themselves in it, and that's exactly what we would need to do to be successful here. So, yeah. And I'd be curious to learn more about your history with that too, down the road.
My question is, for the first phase, we'd have to get $16,000, right, from the city?
I think that's the ask that.
The second phase, does the city have to kick in more money then, or how does that work?
That wouldn't be a place that I would fit in terms of the conversation. My contract would be with a nonprofit. Certainly, if we're in a partnership, we would be part of those conversations, but
Respond to that.
I'd be happy to step away.
Excuse me. The second phase would be for the lake improvement project itself, say some form of dredging, where, potentially, I think, with the engineers the phase two estimate they had was 10.8 million. I believe there was an addendum letter that later came in and said they could, probably that could be around 7.5, something like that. So our 3 million then would have to be matched to some level to cover the cost, the remaining costs. To answer your question, yeah, the city would have a lot of skin in the game, but,
16 would be cheap then.
well, you know, we're, it's strange how you can look at it. It's 16 million to potentially save 3 million, or 16,000 to potentially save 3 million. So, you know, it's, this work is important to do right now, because we're kind of grabbing at numbers. That 3 million sounds like a good number. It sounds aggressive, but, you know, based on other campaigns that have been done. But it'd be good to know, have a little firmer grip on what we can do.
Joe, along those lines, if phase one tells you, you know, you're hoping for 3 billion, but we're guessing that you're only gonna raise 1 million. What's the friends of Fire Steel do then?
Well, if that's, you know, then it just depends on what kind of a match, you know, can be worked. You know, that's, if we raise the money, it'll be committed to that purpose. You can't repurpose that money.
And
So,
I can speak to that as well if I
please, go
could
ahead.
invite myself in. Through phase one, certainly we're striving to come to the point where that goal is achievable and we have the strategies and elements in place to do so. If through phase one, we find that where we sit exactly today doesn't lend itself for a successful $3 million campaign, it is my job and responsibility to bring forward why, and then the strategies and the activities that we need to take and move forward with so that we are ready. So it's not a no, it's a not yet, here's why, this is what we're gonna do, now we're gonna go get it. So.
Cindy, you're a perfect example of my next question. Obviously, people in Salem enjoy our lake and a lot of areas around here. Is part of this figuring out how to get people to invest from other communities as well?
Having not started yet, in my head, that's what in my head, it seems foolish that we wouldn't engage those who benefit from this project. There are opportunities to invite those individuals to be part of making it possible and happen. Yeah.
Joe, you want us to give 16,000 down the road. How did you come up with the 16,000 for your group?
It's through fundraising efforts that we've had right
So
now.
you started that
Yeah.
already?
Yeah, we'll actually, hopefully shortly, we get under contract. And the first step of the terms would be a $5,000 with the contract. And then the work would begin in April, and then there'd be $10,000 at that point, or roughly half of the cost. And then our hope would be then at the completion, which is targeted around end of October, November, then the balance would be due, and that's what the city could help us with, is that second half.
And Danny, they haven't even asked you yet.
No, I know that. We're looking. I'm sure it's coming.
So there was one other project that Cindy had that I thought, at least I found it to be most interesting, and that was the egg,
Stockyards Egg Experience.
Stockyard Egg Experience, and it was with Jim Wooster, is that correct? Maybe if you could give a little background on that.
What I'm concluding is that that project was of particular interest because when we visited about it coming together, that was over $3 million, but the first $1 million of it was raised outside of Sioux Falls, and it was raised regionally, primarily from the egg community. My husband's a fifth-generation farmer. I think getting in front of someone and understanding the egg environment when they're being invited to invest in something is something that I can come to with some pretty, some clarity and some genuine empathy during that conversation. But that was a very special project because I think there's a lot of elements to that. The city partnership with Parks and Rec, the economic development piece, there is an element of nostalgia that was an important motivator for some of those that chose to invest in that project. Again, the regional component, people giving that don't even live there, the tourism piece, there are a lot of alignments, I think. Is that what you were speaking to?
Exactly, you spoke to it,
Yeah.
because our thought has always been, obviously, the city of Mitchell will be asked to, contribute, but it's, the people that use the lake, the people that have, interest and are passionate about, water quality improvement, they're not necessarily from right here. So having somebody who understands that, from a fundraising aspect, there's, you can go a little bit wider and, maybe get help also, out away from Mitchell. That was my thought. And I thought that museum was a good example of that.
And I think a lake's way more fun than a museum anyway.
Joe, will you have, in phase one or prior to phase one, negotiate terms with her for phase two? Or will it be like FIRA, pay us some more and I'll give you some more? Pay us some more and give you some more?
Well, it's a good question, and the way this has been done at this point is we're going to be under contract before any work starts. And so I'm assuming as phase two approaches, if it's evident that that's where we're going to go and Cindy's company is who we're going to use, then I would assume that we would get under contract before that would begin. At least, that would be my intention. I think, and I'll just say this because FIRA became, they got kind of a bloody nose out of that deal, but they didn't have the information either. They needed the money to go get the information. So they said, we can get that for you, but you'll have to pay, because they had to go generate it. There was cost associated with it. That's why that happened that way. And I still think that I don't like doing business like that. I'd much rather, have the contract in hand and the purpose clear and, a strategy in place. And then I think we can get more comfortable with it because it's going to be expensive. But, if we've known that from the beginning.
So logistically, Nate, is there money in the Park and Rec budget that could squeeze out $16,000?
The only funds that we have are the boat dock funds, that we still have 35,000 in that. That could be a supplemental transfer this spring, but that's the only money that we have available. And that's
But you're
30.
still waiting to hear on that study from
Yes.
National Parks in North
Yep.
Dakota State.
We don't have any, we haven't said what those funds would be used for at this point because we're waiting for the public use plan, which hopefully will be done this spring as well, so.
Just on a timing matter, I think that if, I want to make sure I have the terms right because I'm going to say them, but, the third part of that term would be at the completion of phase one project. So that means basically between January and October, probably end of October, we would have time to come up with that balance, which would be about 16,000. Of 2020, yes.
This year.
So, it's not something we gotta have by mid-February or something like that, is what I'm getting at.
That's a good thing.
Yeah. Well, the flexibility in the terms is nice. It allows you, time to get creative if you need to, I guess.
Cindy, I was going to ask you another question. You keep bouncing back and forth.
That's okay.
Hope you're all right with that. First of all, thanks for coming in because it's a lot better to be asking questions in person and appreciate your presence.
Happy to.
You were noting that you were just jotting down potential sources or where you could go. Can you obviously this might be a new project, but you address new projects, it seems like all the time, different types. So this is a lake. Where do you search out the ability to actually apply for grants? Do you have a network or what exactly? How does your company go about doing that?
Sure, that's a great question. I will preface my answer by saying that grants is a really trendy word that we all kind of like. But grants isn't how you get to the finish line with a capital campaign. It certainly would be an element of it if I was to take a pie and break down what percentage is going to come from individuals, corporate grants, so on. That piece would be very small. Where I find those grant opportunities, I have a strong network that I can tap into. Of course, we have a national database that we're members of that actually is not tremendously helpful, but it's important to have access to it and to go through the process and that. It's really just 20 years of experience watching what grants get. I mean, I think this stuff's fun. I love to track all this kind of stuff. So I've got the list of what did the Helmsley Foundation give and how much this year. And I just have kind of a little grid going, and when it matches a project, I pull the grid out. So it's just research that I actually find kind of interesting. There's kind of an art and a science to it, I guess.
And then a follow-up with what John was talking about with the phase two. We know the phase one is a fixed amount with expenses. How do you structure phase two if you're able to get together with the Friends of Fire Steel? How does that work? If you can maybe elaborate a little bit on that. I don't know if you're far enough to talk about that or not.
I can answer the question the same way I answer a question with any group that's asking how much does it cost to raise money, and you don't know how much money you're being asked to raise. And because that's really what you're asking, and that's a fair question. Everyone should ask that question. The cost to raising money is somewhere between 8 to 10%. That includes all aspects of raising the money. Certainly hiring professional support, or if you are a established nonprofit and you have your own development team, that's where those costs come. So I would certainly be a significant portion of that dollar amount. And typically how I do it is we break it out monthly, and so that it's something that's based upon something incremental and it's very partnership oriented. I can also be very flexible with how that goes because we're all working towards the same goal. But hopefully that's as accurate of an answer I can give you.
A percentage, that's.
I don't raise it off a percentage. I don't say, well, if I get this ask, I get this piece of it. But the cost of raising money is somewhere between 8 and 10%. Yeah. So it's, yeah. Other questions about that? I think that's when it starts to get, people start having more questions about that aspect, and I'll answer it as best as I can. But until I know exactly how many dollars we need to raise and the window in which we're trying to raise it, I can't give an exact dollar amount, nor could anyone who's being asked to, what's it cost to build my house?
So in past projects, when you've looked at, because you just talked about the time element, in past projects, what do you foresee that phase two spanning? Are we talking years? Are we talking months? Are we talking somewhere in between?
My hope is that from start to finish, we're done in less than 2 years. If there's multi-year pledges, then that process becomes more of an accounting function, but to raise the dollars and to be all of us getting together and celebrating, we should be doing that in 2 years. Certainly, there's lots of unknowns that I can't predict right now, but the way I build a campaign, that's how long it takes. You guys know what questions to ask. You're doing your diligence. That's good.
He's a very good fundraiser over there, Jeff.
I think we've got like half the committee ready to go right now.
Well, the reason Danny brings that up is he led the charge on the soccer fields, and we raised how much money there, Danny?
About 800, a little less.
800. Steve and I were on a very small committee that raised 1.4 for the ice arena here in town, and there was others, and so this is a benevolent community.
Oh, it absolutely is. It absolutely is. And what you're demonstrating is that with the right leadership and all of the elements, quality of life resonates with Mitchell. Once you're getting, that $3 million mark, though, things start to look a little different with fundraising. And so I'm glad to be invited in to be a part of paving that way. I'll step away.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further for Mr. Kip, Mr. Friends of Fire Steel?
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Item 16, approval official depositories for the city of Mitchell for 2020.
This is just the yearly designation of depositories that we have to do by law.
Move to approve. Second.
Motion by Mr. Allen, second by Mr. Rice. Further discussion? Anybody in the audience wish to address this?
Mr. Mayor, I will be abstaining.
Okay. You want to do a roll call vote?
No.
Okay. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay? And
Abstain.
one abstention. Okay. Action to award bid for Mitchell Airport Snow Removal Contract Rebid Project 2019-53R2. Mr. Croce.
Mr. Mayor and Council, so 2 bids were received. The Quality Cut Snow was the low bidder at a base bid of $65,000. The bid is for a single-year lease with a possible renewal up to 5 years. In addition to that, I put down some of the costs that the city of Mitchell has incurred over 2018, overtime salaries and equipment and maintenance. Total expenses for 2018 were $35,000. Expenses for 2019 are expected to, surpass that $35,000 mark with the storms that we've had. Unfortunately, we did have that last storm at the end of December. And additionally, we've seen winter storms take longer and more continuous duration. The problem that we've seen is not having the required personnel on staff. We basically rob from other parts of Public Works to utilize personnel that are already hired. This causes a problem, just like we've seen in some of the snow removal on the street shop, is very extended hours for these people. They have to continue to do that snow removal during the storm because as soon as conditions clear and people are able to fly, they expect the airport open. And if we waited until after a storm, it would just, for a lot of these events, it would just be, it would take a long time, a lot longer. The biggest one is obviously emergency transportation. We want to keep that operation going. And so our recommendation is to approve award. I just wanted to include the revenue under expenditures for 2018 was $17,387, and the anticipated revenue under is expected for 2019 is $92,000. We increased the rental and lease, so again, it's expected that we would receive the funds. Again, that's anticipated only for 2019.
Kyle, are they going to use their own equipment or use some of the city's equipment? And then are we going to retain our equipment that we have out there?
So we would use the equipment that we have right now for the runway specifically. They would utilize their own equipment and fuel. They would be under contract to, when a storm event hits a certain number of inches, just under 2 inches, they would be required to be there and start snow removal. The airport manager would contact them directly, and they would be out there. But again, instead of trying to find someone, use our own equipment, get up there, use personnel from a different department or division in Public Works, this would be a contract and they'd be required to be there.
Question on your $17,000 estimate, is there depreciation on equipment included in that? You just have maintenance and fuel.
Yeah, I did include the depreciation and depreciation on equipment, yes.
Okay, that goes to Jeff's question of whether we use our equipment or they would use theirs. The other question, and you kind of mentioned a little bit, and the contract isn't in this, is there a penalty if they don't show up and clear the runway?
I'd have to look at that, Justin. I don't recall the penalty on the.
I mean, obviously, when the city was doing it, we can require we get a city person out there, but if since it's not a city person that has to show up and use city equipment and then whatever of their own equipment, if they get in a car accident and are not there for 2 days, what's our remedy?
Yeah, I don't believe that there were any penalty provisions built in. If there were, it probably would have changed the amount of.
It
bid
could
as
change the
well.
amount, but, I mean, we're going from $35,000 to $65,000, and for paying a $30,000 premium, we better know that it's gonna happen.
Are they doing the runway, Kyle, or is this?
They're not doing the
The
runway.
runway
Mike
will
is,
still be done by Mike.
right.
By Mike.
By
Okay.
Mike. They're doing the.
The approach in the map,
Right,
what's
right.
shown in the map.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
Just to tell you, and we don't have that in their contract, but the last 2 storm events, the one in October and this last one, the personnel have been out there to work with us and see what they would be working with. I don't know if that gives us a guarantee,
That's
but it
better
doesn't.
than them not
Yes, sir.
knowing what they
Yes.
potentially are getting into.
Yes, sir.
I'm sure the contract does have the ability to end it if they're not performing. Would that be
Yeah.
a safe assumption?
Right, yeah. If they're not completing the work, then that's a breach of the
Okay.
contract and can be terminated.
I believe that business too is about a quarter or a third of a mile from the airport.
Oh,
And that
Right.
was one of,
It's on
sorry.
East
We're right
Airport
on
Road.
the airport. Instead of going to the airport, you go east 2 blocks or so. It's on the north side of the
In
road.
that.
And that was one of the
That was
requirements.
development.
That was one of the requirements that in the contract that they had to be within a certain radius of the airport. Yes, sir.
okay. That answers some of my concern. Thank you.
Move toward the bid to a quality cut.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Allen, second by Mr. Rice. Further discussion? Is there anybody in the audience who wishes to address this? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Action on Resolution R 2020-01, approval of TIP handbook and materials. Mr. Johnson.
All right, well, I'll try to keep things short. If you remember, about a year and a half or so ago, the council approved an ordinance that modified our existing TIF procedures and code, really to try to streamline the process. We stripped back the TIF review committee, and we kind of defaulted back to what state law provides for the procedure, but we did also put in their language that the council would approve a handbook so that there would be some guidelines and everything for people to follow when they're beginning that application process. So this is that handbook. We just didn't have a reason to bring it back until now, I guess. So the handbook does lay out the guidelines that an applicant would want to keep in mind. It goes into a bit of the procedure that they'll have to follow. And a lot of it is touching on the requirements of state law. A lot of it is touching on things that the city has identified as priorities or preferences over the years and over the last few TIFs. So I guess go ahead if you've got a.
Yeah, I just have 2 comments to add in. The one thing it really takes a lot of what was happening in that TIF committee review and puts it into the handbook materials. One of the ideas with that is trying to be able to make sure that developers in that initial phase of considering a TIF have that opportunity to have some of those confidential conversations first to make sure that the TIF being proposed is going to be in line with what city goals are for development moving forward and some of the strategies the council has set in the past. So it takes kind of one of the layers of red tape out of the process. It was kind of a duplicate effort before. Another thing we did actually have, we reviewed it for our financial changes that we've made in the financial review of TIFs. We think that's consistent. And a lot of the things you would have seen in the previous committee is now covered through the handbook and the internal staff review process.
And can you comment on who's the administrative review committee?
Don't we have that designated?
I don't think we designated that. I'm trying to remember which version we have, because.
So on the past one, who was involved?
So, well, if you're talking about the TIF committee, that was both inside and outside.
Council? You were on it?
Planning and zoning.
Outside members, I think there was a chamber representative on it, a representative of the county, school.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
So there were multiple members on the TIF committee, or the TIF review committee that used to be in place. The committee that we're talking about now would be an internal team.
City
and
only?
if the mayor wanted, not necessarily, it's
Okay.
just primarily city staff, and then if we wanted to have representatives, we could have them involved from any of those other organizations as
Okay.
well. But it would just be, basically whoever the mayor designates to serve in that function. And if you don't recall, I know it's been a while since we last did a TIF, but, the procedure used to be is that we would kind of informally do that administrative review, and then we'd go to the TIF review committee, and then we'd go to the planning commission, and then we'd go to city council. But now, we're doing that administrative review, and then it can go right to the planning commission, right to council, and.
Yeah, so there's still two public meetings on it where the public will be informed. It just allows us to flush out some of those details before we get to that point.
Basically streamline it, and the reason this is up now is obviously there has been some interest in some tips coming forward, so.
So, really everything that's been built into the handbook, and into the application materials and everything now is stuff that either comes out of state law or has been taken out of the previous ordinance, the way that it used to be set up. There's, bits and pieces that came out of that. And then there's a few pieces that came out of other communities, the way that they've been handling TIFs too. So it's kind of a combination of all those. And Toby, who has done our reviews in the past, also said this was one of the best ones he's dealt with.
Motion approved 2020-01.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Barrington, second by Mr. McCardle. Further discussion? Is there anybody in the audience who wishes to address this? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Action on resolution R 2020-02, a plat of lot 60 of Maui Farm, second addition to subdivision southeast quarter of section 31, township 104 north, range 60 west, 5th prime meridian, city of Mitchell, Davis County, South Dakota.
Mayor and council, this plat was presented to the planning commission at their last regular meeting and did recommend approval. You can kind of see that pretty much follows the master plan that's already submitted out there, so.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Smith, second by Mr. Allen. Further discussion? Anybody in the audience wish to address it? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Action on resolution R 2020-03, a plat of lot E, block 7 of Westwood, first edition of subdivision southeast quarter, section 16, township 103 north, range 60 west, 5th prime meridian, city of Mitchell, Davis County, South Dakota.
Again, this plat was presented to the planning commission at their last regular meeting and did recommend approval. Basically, if you saw the aerial, there's a building missing because the area was taken prior to the second building being in construction. So where you see, I don't know if you can see it on there, in your map might have that little blue X. That it's an access easement that's kind of just basically between them to hook onto the two big ones. So that's why there's a second building that's on the east of that X, but this, because the aerial is a little outdated, so. Makes sense? Okay.
Motion to approve.
Motion by Mr. McCardle,
Second.
second by Mr. Rice. Further discussion? Is there anybody in the audience who wishes to address this? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Action to approve agreement A 2020-1, proposal for consulting services for design and permitting for Dry Run Creek Phase 2 of the infrastructure design project 2020-33. Mr. Croce.
Mr. Mayor and Council, so this is the second part of the contract with infrastructure for the Dry Run Creek area and developing a design and performing the services in that area. And what we want to achieve is a reduction in erosion control from the runoff and a possible reduction in any future flooding. I put down Joe had included the history of the design and development of this project right now. And so the staff recommends that City Council approve the next phase of consulting to Infrastructure Design Group.
Got a couple questions. First, you list 80,000 as budgeted and requesting 97,800. Where's the other money come from? Joe.
We did apply for
State
grant
name.
funds
State name,
for this
Joe.
Joe Schrader, city engineer.
You know, you gotta follow the same rules everybody else does.
We know who you are.
Sure, sure,
TV might not.
sure. At I believe it was 2 meetings ago, we brought forth a grant to apply for these projects on the first phase and the second phase, along with some additional surveying. We are relying on that grant to totally fund this portion, and if we don't, we would be looking for a contingency fund to fund the entire portion.
And when would that timing be known?
I believe we will know February, March timeframe.
Okay. Another question. In one of the sections, it talks about public involvement, that they will be sending out newsletters to homeowners along there. Will the city get to review the newsletters before they're sent out? We've had issues in the past where we've had contractors send letters that are written poorly, have misspellings, and do not really convey what they're doing. Will we have the opportunity, will somebody in the city have the opportunity to review those before they're sent?
Yes.
Okay. My final item is that in the early 2000s, the railroad identified hazardous waste site under the old roundhouse, which is basically just south of the current Depot restaurant. And they planted some sort of trees along the north shore and removed at least 10 55-gallon drums of hazardous soil. I've never heard whether that has been totally remediated or not, and was wondering if that is part of this investigation.
I know we are doing additional permitting as part of this project. If that is not included, if we found it during construction, we would proceed how we would on any project when we find contaminated soils. We contact DENR and we get it cleaned up accordingly.
Mr. Mayor and Council, so I did have a earlier conversation earlier last year, I would say, and there was confirmation of a cleanup at that site, and it's a monitoring site right now. So DNR is aware of the site and what the cleanup was. If we ran into something, we would immediately contact DNR, but they're aware of the site. Yes, sir.
When was that started to get cleaned up? How long?
Oh, I'd have to go back. I'm sorry. I'd have to go back and look at it.
Dusty was the Park and Rec director at the
I thought it
time.
was 8 or 10 years ago.
Yeah, at least. It would be maybe longer than that. But there are monitoring wells in the parking lot, and DNR continues to have that as
Plant some trees there?
Yeah, yes, they did. They planted some trees. I don't know if they survived.
I don't know, I guess. You won't know until spring now.
Okay, I know that was there, and I wanted to, especially if it ends up where we do some shaping or other things along there for improvement.
Yes, sir. And we're going to contact DNR anyway with the plan that infrastructure comes up with. So.
That's all my questions on that.
Okay.
Move to approve. Second.
Motion by Mr. Allen, second by Mr. Rice. Further discussion? Is there anybody in the audience who wishes to address it? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Action to approve agreement A 2020-2 HDR wastewater treatment facility project plan 2020-17. Mr. Croce or
Mr. Mayor and Council, I'll start with this one, and Joe will jump in with any questions, to address any questions. We have had HDR under contract for different reasons, helping us through the wastewater treatment and water plant. In the past, they've done an energy audit study in 2012, and they just recently did a risk management plan for us. So they're very I guess, intimate with the details of both wastewater and water, we feel very confident by using HDR for these services. Again, the wastewater facility is considerably old at this point, constructed in the 1970s. We did not have a assessment done with the wastewater study that SPN did for us last year. We wanted to go and look at the grid clarifiers and replace those. We know they're very old, but stepping back, we really need to look at an overall plan for an update for the wastewater treatment plant. That's where we feel like having HDR come in and provide that plan is really going to help us be efficient with the improvements at the wastewater treatment plant. So you can see the amount budgeted was for 50. It's actually in the first line item. It's 50,000, not 80,000 in professional services for wastewater, and then 75 for what was anticipated for the grit classifier replacement. So we do have the funds available for the overall facility plan.
Right, the funds are available, but we need to point out to council, because typically I know what our study projects are going to be, and this was not listed. This is being changed after the budget was approved. So I just want to make sure everyone's clear of that, because it wouldn't be listed on the previous studies. Funding's there, it's just a deviation from what was discussed publicly during your hearing. So I just want to make sure that's clear.
So any grants available for this one?
Normally for this type of project, no.
No.
We'd be looking at loan.
But you do need this kind of a study done to apply for financing for projects.
Correct.
We need to do remediation or remodeling or, and Stephanie, I'll use planning for 2040 or in that time frame or even sooner, so.
The last time this has been done, Kyle, was 40 years ago,
70.
in 72.
When did we
Well, we
move?
did an energy audit, I think in 2012, but that's not I guess that's not an overall plan.
Sure. John, but
Maybe.
I was 4 years old then. John Vermillion, Utility Superintendent. The plant was constructed in 78, and, part of this project is looking at our aeration basins, and they still are the original equipment, mechanical aerators. So when they did the energy audit, that was one of the things they flagged was they were inefficient, the cost of energy. I think our bill out at the lagoons is running about 12 grand a month.
I think 10,000.
Yeah, anywhere from 10 to 12. Yep. So it's running quite high because of that. And, with the improvements, your payback won't be, it's going to cost a lot of money to do it regardless, but, your payback probably won't be, 20 years or something like that. But something that we do need to move forward with.
So, a little different question, and I guess I don't have a problem with this, but we've got the study underway of the water treatment. When is that done or presented? And I want to make sure I keep in my mind all the, I'll call it the dominoes that fit together for the wastewater and potable water.
Yeah, so the water supply study is really at its end. And we would like to meet with council and talk about some of the options and some of the, I guess, requirements on where the council sees us going as far as an additional supplemental source. And what kind of, I guess, situation we would want to plan for. And that includes having storage in the city, as well as having a supplemental source coming from a source. So, Joe, do you have an estimated time on when we could talk to council on that?
I would say we'd probably be comfortable within the next at least couple months moving forward.
Kyle, there's 5 5 Mondays in March, so that might be a good time for a work
I do
session.
think that we need to, I have talked to Kevin about this. We've used a lot of your last council's work sessions on one specific item, and we've been over 2 years since we've discussed council goals. So I'd really like to, if we can, regroup as a council with what your previous list was, and I don't want to give up another one of those 5th Mondays.
Fly in the ointment.
Huh? I know, but I do think you need to get back to some of those original goals, and if we need to set a session before a council meeting, that's great, but I'm getting a little bit leery about always dedicating those to a single subject, and we haven't had a council-wide discussion in over 2 years. So I think that's important for your goal setting to have that conversation as well.
Mr. Mayor and Council, and so we have been working with BY, and they're working with their engineers as well on trying to get some more information on a model for their supply, not just Mitchell, but the rest of their customers. And so that's one of the long lead items is actually getting that model completed from BY. BY is our source right now. They provide us a good water supply, but we did want to make sure that they had that model so that they can give us an accurate estimate of what they believe the cost share would be on any other improvements or any other line coming to Mitchell.
And another good point is if you could have that conversation before your next council work session, you can take all these various pieces that we've been talking about and have a better dedicated conversation about priorities and goals moving forward, yeah. So depending on how long it takes to get that information back. But we also have the, I'm probably going to say this wrong, Kyle, the wastewater collection study.
Yep.
That's right. No, that's right.
So we'll have to hear the results of that one as well. And I think you're going to have a bunch of different components that you're going to want to have an overall city discussion on as well.
And the goal with this report is to have it done by June, so we can use that for budgeting time.
Budgeting next year. 2021.
We'll have enough done by then to make our determination.
Okay, I'll move approval of agreement 2020-02.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Rice. Is there going to be a second? Second by Mr. Smith. Yeah, we're getting ready to gavel that one. Further discussion? Mr. Barrington, you're in a hurry. No. Oh.
You just have to stand up.
Anybody in the audience wish to address this? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion opposed, nay. Motion carried. Executive session, motion to enter into executive session, of course, South Dakota Codified Law 125-23, legal, and South Dakota Codified Law 934-19, economic development.
So moved.
Motion by McCardle, second by Allen. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carried. There will be no action after executive session.
Did you hear that? JP said, I'll see you in the morning.
Oh. You know what?
No, you didn't.
You have that get him a paycheck, order some delicious Omaha steaks. This is customer text support, so you might get a hold of them. Mike at one of the boxes.
Jeff, how's your wife coming along?
And Zachary or Dennis is
Oh, yes, it is, yeah, yep. Oh, very nice. Yeah, you don't get things like that too often. That's the, well, hardly ever, unfortunately.
Oh, so you just are right on the border of my.
He had to leave at 4:30 because he had to go to the bathroom.
these your books out here, Billy? These your books? Oh, Kyle.
can you live in a building, not do their job? Yeah.
I know what you're saying. Private business, you can't. But,
Is that TV still on, Dan?
you know, it says no signal. This isn't
This
on.
one?
It
This
says
one's
no
off?
signal, same as. Is it off? Is it on? Was it on?
The projector was on.
Because that's
The
going,
TV was-
forget that it's
No, that's not
us,
close.
it's going out to our entire community.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous.
It'll work out one way or the other.
Yeah, no kidding.
Did you get my text?
Oh, it's 9 o'clock.
Yeah.
Right, in the middle of the meeting?
No, I leave my phone.
Oh.
I don't, I just leave my phone.